I think at this point, though, it's pretty hard to deny the power that Bitcoin currently has. Up until the last week and a half, with all the discoveries we've seen posted about Google achieving in terms of quantum computing. I think there's a little bit of concern that those type of computers could crack the code for a Bitcoin.
You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to and watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. Well, Ted Thatcher's back with us. Well-known, noted financial expert. Ted, you just released your book, finally. Launch Your Retirement, a financial planning guide to go from saver to spender. Well, I was never a saver, so the transition was easy for me, and I'm not yet retired. But so who's this book for?
It's a great question, Kerry, and as always, it's great to be with you. You know, I think in today's world, there's a ton of information available online about what to invest in, how to start, building up some assets. But the question I get so often is, hey, maybe I've built up this nest egg. How do I take that and replace my paycheck? Kind of say, hey, how do I build that golden goose that lays the golden eggs? And so this book is for that person who's trying to say, hey, I have some money now. How do I replace my paycheck? How do I make sure that I don't have to go back to work anymore?
Okay, so you asked the question, now answer it.
Yeah, so how do we do it, right? Of course. So the book basically outlines our planning process and basically everything you need to do to launch your retirement. So we basically follow what we call the 5-pillar process. And that is first making sure you have an income plan for your money. Basically, like I said, how much money we're going to need to replace that paycheck. And, there's a lot that goes into that, right? You got to make sure you have your Social Security right. A lot of clients we work with will have rental property or a pension, certainly, stocks, maybe dividend stocks, things like that. The second pillar is having an investment strategy, right? There's a lot that goes into that, analytically, of course, but what it boils down to, and I think that sometimes it gets lost in the weeds, is simply having enough money set aside for growth and having enough money set aside for income.
Mm-hmm.
Then we get into our third pillar, and that's actually having a tax strategy for your money. I think a lot of financial advisors I talk to even, honestly, it's like they would treat this word tax like a 4-letter word they can't say. And I really reject that premise. I think that at least for the vast majority of retirees, the analytics and the data tell us that the biggest bill a retiree is going to pay is their tax bill. And then, of course, just to round it off, I would tell you very much that those are our primary sort of foundational pillars. Then we get into what we call advanced planning, healthcare planning for Medicare and legacy planning, estate planning, those types of things. But not to get too long-winded, that's what the book is about, walking you through all those different steps to make sure that you're set up for success in creating that sort of permanent paycheck so you don't run out of money, which is the other question we get a lot.
All right. So let me ask you, what do you think about how Social Security should play into this?
Yeah. Well, I think the one question, Kerry, I get a lot is, especially around Social Security, is, hey, is it going to be there, right? It's underfunded, it's, underwater. And so I think it's created a lot of questions for folks in retirement or getting close to retirement about whether it's going to be able to be counted on. And, how does it play into it? For most people, of course, it's a part of, their monthly expenses. The Social Security office itself has come out and said you would expect Social Security on average, meaning if you have an average American family's expenses and wages, et cetera, that it would maybe count for about a 40% or so of your monthly needs. But to kind of come back to that answer of that question, the way I think about Social Security tends to be a very, I'll say, practical one. And so when I look at Congress, red or blue, I have not seen a real political will from our Congress people to spend less money. And of course, if faced with the option of, I'll say, reducing retirees' Social Security benefits or simply writing a bigger check, it's my opinion at this point, most Congress people would simply choose to write a bigger check, because I just think the incentives are unfortunately such that if they did, vote to be, I'll say, for austerity, they would likely be voted out and maybe replaced by somebody who would be willing to simply, sign that omnibus bill.
Yeah. Yeah, well, but Trump is talking a big game here, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure. The Department of Government Efficiency is what you're referring to, of course, the DOGE.
Yeah, well, I hope it's a Doge and not a dog, right?
I think so. I think, I think most people now will look at the government and say, hey, we're probably spending too much money. And so I think that the Department of Government Efficiency in the natural, initiative in the name is the right thing to prioritize. I think that the natural, criticism is probably too strong of a word, but there is a practical, side of how deep they even can cut. And so, what is sort of required spending and what is discretionary spending comes to mind really quick, right? And most people would argue, of course, Medicare spending and Social Security spending, even military spending, those are, baked in. And so I think under, I would say, really positive auspices like the DOGE, they could cut a third of the budget and still they 2/3 of our spending is still considered, non-discretionary. And so I'm interested to see how deep they're actually able to go. I think if I were going to place my bets on what might be actually some of the most important work that they do, I think it might be around regulations, because I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal just about how much the regulatory environment has grown over the last, even just 10 years. And their argument that they were making, the author in the article, of course, said that if they could basically reduce, the regulatory environment in a substantial way, that we could actually get our GDP up to 6% a year, which is like rocket fuel when it comes to, economic growth, of course. And that could really have an effect on, ultimately the financial picture of the U.S.
The question is, will they do it? And Trump sees hell bent on it now. And look, the military, we all know we need a strong defense, blah, blah, blah. But a veritable fortune gets wasted every year. Like, forget it, right? I mean, we know this, right? As much as half of it gets wasted in, corporate welfare. Look, we've got 350, when I looked 2-3 years ago, billion per year of corporate welfare, right? That's just
Sure.
Government money that's just blown on corporations that don't need it, right? So even if
There's a lot of bloating.
Yeah. And then 350 billion a year of improper payments. And then, like he said, he's not going to touch the money to the recipients, but the people who are there who don't show up to work for years and all the fat there, it's not hard to envision. And then the corruption, like I said, in the military, the spender, right? The big contractors, they just put in change orders and they automatically are accepted. And then the general retires and he goes to work for fill in the blank mega defense contractor. But it's going to be pain here. Like, everybody wants somebody else to take less, but not themselves, right?
I think so. I mean, I do think that the point you make, especially around the defense, is well made. And I think it's one that Trump would agree with, and it doesn't take very far. You don't have to look very far to see the corruption. I mean, the amount of money that's been spent in the Middle East and, what has been, branded as forever wars, deserves, I think, all the criticism in the world. And it is absolutely crazy to think that, one day you can be signing the approval on a contract for, like you said, insert large defense contractor, and then the next day you're sitting on the board. And then 2 years later, you're back in Washington, maybe, if you were lucky. And so I think that is hopefully the kind of thing that we are going to see a lot of light shed on, because I don't know an American on either side of the aisle that just thinks that that's okay. Waste isn't okay. And we've just, especially when the people that pay that price are our kids and our grandkids. I certainly, when I look at my family, I want my kids to have a better life than I have. My folks hoped that for me. And I think that trend certainly, of course, continues.
Of course. Hey, my kids are already having a better life than me, so I'm not complaining. I want them to have a real good life, so when I stop working, they'll be there to pick up the slack for me. But seriously, it's very intractable. Nobody has ever had the political will to do it. Reagan tried. He managed to cut taxes, but he couldn't cut spending. And, but it's an interesting thing. This isn't an ad for Trump or anything else. My own preference was it's the lesser of two evils, or the evil of two lessers. That's what we're always faced with. But this guy, somebody was saying, you think he's stupid? He now is going back to the White House, has the Senate, the House, the Supreme Court, the world's richest man ever working for him, the most notable Kennedy working for him. So if we can't get it done now, Ted, then it's hopeless, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that we have a really interesting window of opportunity as a country, specifically around what we've been talking about here when it comes to efficiency and when it comes to, and I would say hopefully at a minimum, maybe stopping the level of spending, even if we're not able to even if we weren't able to drastically reduce the size of government, which, we could have, again, we kind of discussed already, even if they could just stop the balloon that's been occurring, I think it would be a success. And I think it was Charlie Munger who said, I want to say it was actually this about Elon Musk, which he says, what did he say? He said, never underestimate a man who overestimates himself. And I always struggle with that one.
Yeah, well, right. What's amazing here, Ted, is we see all these governments which are opposed to him, they're all collapsing all over the place. First, we see Germany collapse, then France, probably Canada is collapsing now. I don't see how the current occupant there of Ottawa can stay in, and his government's collapsed around him. They'll have to carry him out in a stretcher, I have a feeling. But I think you're going to see it in China. There's going to be a collapse. It's really interesting world. So getting back to transitioning for retirement, what do you say to the person who says, well, I'm never really going to fully retire?
I think I'd probably say that you're in good company. I have a real mixed group of people that, I've chatted with over the years. And I work with a gentleman I remember, I want to say maybe 2 years ago or something. He had retired, and I think he probably stopped working for maybe about 18 months. And he came back and he basically said, Ted, I'm bored. I'm going to, die with my boots on. And I think that really there is some transition people go to from I'll just say working because they have to pay the bills and working to do something that they find a lot of purpose in and that they enjoy doing. And regardless of what path you take, I think it's really important to think about what you're going to retire to, because retirement isn't the end of the finish line of the marathon, right? You don't just collapse at the end of it. There's chapters in life, and you're making a big transition for most folks in their financial life. And then they're going to find some purpose in something new. And ultimately, again, regardless of whether you're not working entirely or working part-time or taking on a new endeavor, I think just really determining, hey, what am I going to retire to is just as important as, I'll say the allocations and the decimal points and the percentages and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I couldn't agree with you more. Hey, so what do you think looking ahead? And obviously we don't know, but do you think everybody should be putting some money into cryptos?
I think that, when it comes to cryptocurrency, I think I would say a couple things. I think for a while, over the last even several years, I think cryptocurrency has held a place in my mind where it was more of a speculation than a real investment. And I'll speak more specifically of Bitcoin in that scenario. I think at this point, though, it's pretty hard to deny the power that Bitcoin currently has. Up until the last week and a half, with all the discoveries we've seen posted about Google achieving in terms of quantum computing. I think there's a little bit of concern that those type of computers could crack the code for a Bitcoin. But should people have money invested in it? Well, I think, I guess I would say this. It's a cautionary side. Fear of missing out is not an investment strategy. And so while I don't categorize Bitcoin just as a speculation anymore, I do think it is investment, as volatile as that may be. I just wouldn't guide folks towards investing a bunch of money because they're afraid of missing out. And certainly, the other principle that comes to my mind is don't risk the empire for a pot of gold. And so, don't take unnecessary risk is the whole point there. I think when I look at Bitcoin as to where it fits, I think that it trades a lot like equity right now, a lot like technology stocks. You see the correlation with it. And so just like, you might see folks guide toward a diversified mix of stocks, like, big technology stocks, you might include Bitcoin as a piece of that. But I think really where it fits is it trades a lot like an aggressive equity. And so, sure, I probably wouldn't put more than 2 to 5% of my money in that asset. But I think it's beyond the point now where you can avoid the discussion. And I mean, the truth is, I think it's pretty clear that we're at almost ground zero with governmental and institutional adoption. And there's potential for a whole lot more growth from here, to say nothing of the Fed.
Yeah, to say nothing of the Fed. Yeah. So, all right. But so you put a small bit, because it looks like Trump is hell-bent on setting up a national Bitcoin reserve. And if he does that, who knows how high the price can go.
Sure. I think, like I said, a ground zero for governmental adoption and institutional adoption. I mean, maybe not quite ground zero, but close to it. I think that him doing that, I think, is really interesting for several reasons. One, I do think that there's been, because of the discussion in the last several years about how much spending we've had, is that there needs to be some alternative to, quote unquote, the dollar as a reserve currency. Well, I think really interestingly, if you look across the crypto market, almost all crypto is priced in US dollars, like as compared to US dollars. And to your point, given the broader, international scope, you mentioned China and, some decline in, some of these BRICS countries, et cetera. If the United States has a substantial amount of Bitcoin, and it does continue to go up, I think it protects two things. I think it actually protects, interestingly, the dollar as a reserve currency, because everything is priced typically in the crypto world to US dollars. And of course, you have the balance sheet potential, right? If Bitcoin goes up a lot, it potentially, of course, puts the US in a better situation.
All right. Well, this is interesting. Hey, how do we get your book, Ted?
That's a great question. So if you just go to our website, brightlakewealth.com, there's a tab we have there. It says, just for our book, Launch Your Retirement, of course, is the title. You can find it on Amazon. Just Google Launch Your Retirement. You can go to launchmyretirement.com. It's there available. But if you just search for the name of the book, you'll be able to find it real easily.
All right. Well, we got a link in the show notes, this interview on Financial Survival Network, to your book. What's your regular company website?
brightlakewealth.com.
All right. Of course, that's in there. And if you've got any questions for Ted and myself, shoot me an email, kl@kerrylutz.com. When you visit financialsurvivalnetwork.com, you find the links right there in the show notes. While you're there, we just ask you to please sign up for your free newsletter, like 60,000 other FSN community members have. And Ted, we will talk to you soon.
Thank you, Kerry. Good to be with you.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.